Welcome students to Legacy IAS. Today we are going to discuss an important strategy that is related to our prelims 2026. Okay, so this is related to your subject of environment and ecology, right? This is one of the subjects that would have a considerable number of questions. The reason being that the prelims part carries aspirants of both civil services as well as Indian Forest Services. So that is why it naturally becomes much more in proportion, right? If we have to gauge how many number of questions do come from this subject out of 100, then you could safely say that around 17 questions, that is 17% of the paper is from the subject of environment. Okay, now environment is a subject that is interdisciplinary in nature. That means it connects with various disciplines of subject, right? So you need to have extensive knowledge, whether it is connected with the basic sciences, whether it is connected with respect to the biology part of it, chemistry part of it with respect to the pollutants, right? So it becomes very, very extensive in nature, right? So how do we prepare? What should the strategy be when it comes to environment and ecology, right? So the number one thing that we should focus upon is understanding what should my sources be. Okay, what are the sources through which I can learn at least the static part? Okay, where I can go and learn the current affairs part? Okay, secondly, I should also go and visit the previous year questions. Okay, I would say previous year questions, particularly when they are demarcated into various topics and then further subtopics, that would be enhancing your learning curve rather than looking at the previous year question in a holistic manner, right? Third, going for mock tests. Okay, so these three things are important with respect to preparing for environment and ecology on a whole, right? With respect to sources, you could, with respect to static part, you could refer PMF IAS. Okay, this book is one that is very, very comprehensive in nature. Secondly, it also carries most of the previous year questions listed there. Okay, so this means that whenever I'm covering a topic, okay, suppose say it is environmental pollution and degradation, if it is climate change, if it is biodiversity and its conservation, so I will find the previous year questions demarcated as and when the chapter gets over. Okay, this means that I am also referring to the necessary PYQs and learning in depth those PYQs as well, right? One thing that I should definitely keep in mind that PYQs are essential and these also tell me or help me to predict what kind of questions can be expected in the future, right? So one thing, this is for your static portion. Okay, then current affairs, where should I follow the current affairs from? So you could refer to any of the magazines. Current affair magazines can be referred to. Environment is one of the subjects in which current affair becomes an indicator of what do we have to study in the previous in the static portion. This means the filter that I have to apply is current affair lists down some topics or some things that are there in the news, and with respect to that I must revisit my static portion and try to prepare those topics, right? So this is the filter that we are trying to apply, right? So current affair, if you are referring to any kind of magazines, okay, or you have made some kind of summary out of the newspapers like the Hindu or the Indian Express, right? If you have made notes out of them, a lot many times it may so happen that your summaries may not contain all the information because very minute information might also be there and it would be covered by the magazines, right? For example, a particular species, it may so happen that you have not written it in your notes, or something related to a report, right? It may happen that we have not written it. So definitely I should refer to my summaries, and whatever things I feel that are important in the magazines, I can go and refer to it. All right. So this process of filtering process of converting it into marking the static portions should also be complete and read and revised, right? So this is your sources part when it comes to static and current affairs. Okay. Now moving forward to the previous year questions. How many years? Okay. Which years should I definitely focus upon? So this is a question that I get a lot many times. So understanding with respect to previous year questions. Okay. Okay, so what we have done, one is a filter with respect to the current affairs. Okay, anything in the current affairs which I feel from the lens of previous year question is important also becomes a part of my understanding, learning, and memorization. Right. The second part is previous year questions. Okay, previous year questions, ideally, okay, you should at least do 10 years question. Okay, I would suggest that you go from 2011 to 2025. Okay, nearly 15 years of paper, right? This will help you gauge what kind of questions are being asked from which of these sections, right? The previous year questions are a blueprint of what can be asked in the future, right? Second thing, and very very important, is to know which parts are more important than the others. So the last three papers, 2023, 2024, and 2025. Now this tells me what is going on in the news, what is going on in the current affairs, what is the trend of UPSC with respect to the environmental questions, right? So for at least these three, I would suggest that you make notes. Okay, make notes out of it. And I'm not suggesting just the correct part or just the explanation related to those questions. No, you have to do that, and then you also have to make notes for the options that are wrong. Okay, out of the four options we may have one correct, and therefore the rest of the three also should go into your notes by you researching a little bit into that content. Okay, more often than not you will find that if you go into a bit of depth with respect to these previous year questions, you will find that it may connect to a future question, right? With respect to these, at least the information should be there, at least with respect to the correct option, right? This will also help you to find out what is the trend. Okay, suppose you do not want to overspend your time with respect to a particular topic which may not appear in your paper at all. Okay, for example, overspending your time on international conventions and reports. Okay, overspending your time with respect to other, right? So I need to apply a filter. The filter comes in the form of PYQs, and the filter comes in the form of current affairs, right? So these become very very important for me, right? Now the third is the mock tests. Okay, this is one thing this is one thing that you should focus upon. Mock tests are not just to test you. Okay, they are there for first your revision cycle, second to make a strategy out of 100 questions, that I am able to read all of the 100 questions, I am able to even take a calculated risk with respect to selecting the right option. Okay, third, any type of gap in my knowledge or in with respect to the current affairs, I am able to make a note of it and enter it into my notes, right? These are the notes that are essential for the last minute revision, right? So this is the purpose of mock test, and these mock tests you have to write along with the post test analysis. Okay, post test analysis means that you should be sure that this was one question in which I was 100% sure, and therefore I have got a correct answer. If I have got a wrong answer, then this deserves multiple revisions in the cycle, and this should be shifted to the revision bucket, right? Now, with respect to 50-50 questions, in which I was able to eliminate two of the options and I was confused between the two. Okay, so what is the correct logical chain of arriving at that correct option with respect to the topics that are there in the environment, right? These logical chains must be written in your notes. Okay, I should not get confused when I am seeing that question another time or in the final prelims paper. Okay, so post test analysis, I should have logical chains through which various kinds of knowledge will form a chain and finally help me achieve the correct answer. These logical chains must be there. I must take out those questions in which I was 100% sure, but due to lack of revision or due to lack of understanding, whatever be the cause, write it down. Okay, this is what your analysis means, that you have to write down so that you do not commit such kind of mistakes. Okay, what is your level of calculated guess with respect to each of the topics? You must have a clear idea of whether your guesswork does it work or not, okay, or whether you can make it even better, right? This is the purpose of tests, right? Without which, if you are just going to write mock tests, it is not going to result into better outcome unless you do the analysis yourself, right? So I would definitely suggest, even if you are writing less number of tests, doing post-test analysis will increase the chances of your success, right? So these are in the priority order as well, right? I must first visit these static sources. Okay, it is only after reading it multiple times, maybe 2 or 3 times. Okay, you should plan to have 3 iterations of the revision, then 3 iterations of the previous year questions. Okay, and also mock tests. Okay, after end of each of these first and second iteration, you should be ideally writing a mock test, right? This means that 2 iterations of mock test should be completed and one more iteration could be that of previous year question. Okay, if you prepare like this, you would be aligned with what the UPSC has been asking in the recent years. You would be much more extractive with respect to the current affairs of what is important and what is not important, what I have to do, what I can leave out. Okay, so please try to follow this strategy. Okay, now moving forward, let us see the trends. Okay, what are the trends in the previous year question? Okay, trends in the previous year questions. So I have made 2 columns. Okay, first for seeing what were the questions with respect to the 3 years, 22, 23 and 24, and this is for 2025. All right, we divide it into 5 topics. Okay, 5 topics with respect to the distinction or the exclusivity of each of these topics. Okay, we have ecosystem and ecology, we have pollution and environmental degradation, biodiversity and conservation, climate change and international convention and organizations, right? Like I was talking about the trends. Okay, which one I should prioritize? Okay, which one has more amount of factual content, which one has conceptual content, which ones I should definitely look the current affairs of? All of this gets decided by the fact that you are looking at the trend. Okay, now if I look at the trend, 13 questions in 2025 were asked from the subject of environment. Okay, this is one of the lowest in the recent years. You can see it that between 2022 to 2024 we had 54 questions. Okay, 54 questions in 3 years. That amounts to 18 questions per year on an average. Or if I have the total, then 67 questions. 67 questions in 4 years. This again amounts to 16 to 17 questions every year, right? So I can say that my paper would be around carrying 17% of environment and ecology questions, right? That is something that I can expect, right? Even if you find that some topics are difficult for you, okay, the difficulty only arises in the form that I am not able to memorize the factual content, because most of the conceptual content would be something that is easy for you. Once you have understood, you may be able to apply it much better, but the factual content is something that we keep forgetting, right? So 17% questions are there. Some questions would be conceptual in nature, some questions would be factual in nature. I at least have to attempt all the conceptual questions. Okay, with respect to the factual content, I should be more aware about the current affairs as well as the previous year questions and then go for the rest of the percentage, right? Now, understanding what is the priority of the topics, where did most of the questions come from? Okay, if I look at the last 4 years, then I will see that most of the questions have come from this topic, pollution and environmental degradation, right? Here we are including most of the legislations also with respect to plastic pollution also. Okay. Then we have this climate change. Climate change is a new area where most of the questions came in 2025. Okay, this was a change in the trend from the earlier. Okay, and this trend is gone, is something that is motivated by COP 29. Okay, COP 29 happened, and there was more questions on the carbon markets, that is article 6 of Paris agreement, right? So that is why they asked you more questions for this, and therefore it also gives me an insight that COP 30 may be equally important, and COP 30, the Belém package, would be very, very important, right? And therefore I can expect maybe 2 or 3 questions on this, right? Now, moving forward, with respect to biodiversity and conservation and ecosystem ecology, I have 12 questions each. Okay, this is the total part. But with respect to 2025, I had just 1 question, and with respect to biodiversity and conservation, I had 2 questions. Okay, definitely climate change was the one that took the major share, right? With respect to pollution and environmental degradation, I again see that this was the second highest questions in the 2025 part, right? International conventions and organizations are very, very less in number. All right, so this becomes important for us to see where to focus upon with respect to all of these topics, right? So I might change, I might see that in 2026 the proportion would be somewhat the same as which is happening with respect to these 3 years. Okay, but there can be extra focus on some more of the topics. Okay, one of the few topics can be asked in more depth. Okay, maybe there can be more questions in ecosystem and ecology. Okay, maybe there can be more question with respect to biodiversity and its conservation. Maybe they will also keep, with respect to climate change, they will also keep those numbers uniformly. Okay, since there were less number of questions, they might increase it in the other 3 categories, right? So this kind of a trend will help us to understand which topic should I prioritize first, right? Which topics can I go into depth with? Which topics should I prepare the current affairs more extensively? All right. Now moving forward to individual topics. Okay. So moving forward with individual topics, the first one is ecosystem and ecology, right? This is the most conceptual part. This is the most conceptual part of your environment. Okay, here there is very less number of things that you need to remember, right? Remember as in memorizing it, right? We are talking about the factual content and versus the conceptual content. So this is conceptual heavy, right? So for this, what kind of topics do we have? We have environment. What is the definition of environment? What do you mean by ecology? What is the definition of ecosystem? This was a question that was asked. Okay, very, very similar options. So I need to understand what is the difference with respect to the definition. Okay, how do we define ecosystem? What is meant by biome? Okay, what do you mean by energy flow? Okay, why the ecological pyramid is always upright? Okay, what is the law with respect to the decrease of energy as we move up the trophic chain, right? Going forward with respect to food chain and food web, what is the difference between the two? Basic definitions. Okay, let us be very, very sure about we understand and interlink all of these concepts. Otherwise they may ask a question in which the definitions may be so similar that it would be difficult for us to mark the right answer, considering the fact that the options are very, very similar, right? Then biogeochemical cycles. This was also a previous year question as in the last few years. Okay, we have nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, we have sulfur cycle, phosphorus cycle. Which ones of them are sedimentary in nature? Which ones are perfect cycle? Which ones are imperfect cycles? These cycles become very, very important. Okay. Now going forward, terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. Okay, multiple times. Okay, at least 2 times they have asked about what are the marine organisms with respect to aquatic ecosystems. Okay, they have asked about diatoms, they have asked about dinoflagellates, they have asked about coccolithophores. Okay, all of these becomes important with respect to your understanding what is a phytoplankton, what is a food chain with respect to aquatic ecosystems. You should be preparing at least these things because they can appear in the paper anytime, right? Terrestrial ecosystems. Okay, even with respect to terrestrial ecosystems, you will see questions that ask you about productivity. Okay, so first of all, I must understand how it is classified as a terrestrial ecosystem. Okay, what are the parts? For example, there are forest, there is grassland, there is deserts, right? And then how do we classify these two, terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, with respect to the productivity? Productivity meaning that how much of the biomass is present with respect to the area, right? That is how much of sunlight is being fixed into the biomass, right? So productivity is also being asked, right? Along with that, very important is ecotone. Okay, so you would have heard about wetlands, mangroves, estuaries. All of these are the transition zone between the terrestrial as well as the aquatic ecosystem, and therefore their productivity remains to be higher, on the higher note, right? And therefore I should also be able to arrange them in a sequence if I am asked about the various ecosystems and their productivity, right? This becomes very, very important. Then biotic interactions. Okay, biotic interactions, mostly you will be asked about symbiotic interactions. Okay, the interactions between different biotic components of the ecosystem. Okay, whether it is predator, okay, whether it is amensalism, whether it is commensalism. Okay, what kind of interactions do these biotic components undergo? Okay, so these are the things that I must be conceptually aware of, and I would be able to answer the questions, right? Now, specifically with respect to these, okay, looking at the previous year questions, what should be prepared is terms, first of all. Terms, I must understand the definitions very clearly. I should know what they mean and what do they not mean. Okay, how is it separate from the definition of different other terms? The second thing is surrounding. Okay, a lot many times you will find that there are questions on species, right? But you must derive a distinction. Okay, there was a question on squirrel, right? So there is a distinction between this topic and the topic of biodiversity and its conservation. Under biodiversity and its conservation, we are mainly looking at the species that are endangered, okay, that are vulnerable, that are near threatened, okay, something that you can find in the national parks. Okay, but under this topic, you are looking at animals who are there in your surroundings. Okay, there in your surroundings, and what I should be noting about them. Okay, maybe you are observing, for example, they asked about squirrels, maybe next time they will ask about crows. Okay, I should be preparing at least the nutrition, whether they are herbivores, whether they are carnivores, whether they are omnivores. I should prepare their behavior. Okay, what is their behavior? Whether they come out at night time, okay, whether they are present during the daytime, whether they use a certain kind of feature, okay, for their shelter, right? So features, all of this becomes very, very important along with their role in the ecosystem. What UPSC is trying to test here is they are seeing whether you are observant of the surroundings around you, whether you can gauge whether a animal is omnivore, herbivore or carnivore, okay, whether they are having a shelter, what are their behaviors, okay, whether they have a certain feature or a role with respect to the ecosystems, right? So this is how you should prepare for this topic. Okay, now moving forward, we have pollution and environmental degradation. Okay, so with respect to pollutants, we have environment pollution, air, water, soil, noise pollution, radioactive pollution, e-waste, acid rain, remedies for pollution, government initiatives, and bioremediation. Okay, so with respect to pollutants, most of the questions that are being asked, okay, so first of all, you should know about what are the index. Okay, index. Now, why I'm talking about index? For example, air quality index, because these indices will tell you which of the gases are, or which gases or which particulate matter. suppose PM 2.5, PM 10, or the pollutants like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, ozone, okay, which ones are more important and are being tracked by the government agencies as well, right? So I must note down what are these pollutants, and the best way to know that is through the index itself. That is, what measure are we taking to understand how much it is getting polluted in the atmosphere or environment, right? So this index parameters becomes important. Now index parameters related to both air, water, soil. Okay, what are the various kinds of parameters that I should understand? Okay, what is causing air pollution? What are the various water pollutants? Okay, what do we have with respect to soil pollution, right? Land degradation, or that is decrease in the fertility of the soil. The second thing is I must note down what are the pollutants. This pollutants, for example, if I talk about air pollutant, if you go for a thorough analysis of the previous year questions, you will notice that there are only some gases that have been repeated multiple times: carbon monoxide, methane, ozone, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxides. Okay, even in 2024 they asked a question about nitrogen oxides. Okay, for at least these gases which are having a presence multiple times in the previous year question, I should be aware of the sources of this pollutant. Okay, what are the harmful effects of these pollutants with respect to health, with respect to environment? Okay, and I should be seeing at the industries. I should also be connecting it with industries that are highly polluting and are the ones that are responsible for these pollutants. Okay, so I must be aware of the highly polluting industries when it comes to these gases. Okay, now I'm not saying that it should be limited to all of these five, but this is a necessary part. Okay, it is not sufficient, but it is necessary. If you have to go beyond this, if you have to go for air pollutants beyond this, do look at the previous year questions and prepare the same. What I'm preparing the source of that pollutant. I'm preparing what are the environmental effects, and then I'm also preparing what is the human effect. Okay, when I'm preparing for source, try to also see what it is used as. Okay, for example, if it has a medical purpose, okay, why can't we avoid it, right? If you think like an administrator, you will be like, if there is source, then why are we using it, right? What is the cause of this pollutant? Okay, for example, we have chlorofluorocarbons that was earlier used in refrigeration, right? Now we have replaced it with HCFCs, and now we see that they are greenhouse gas, right? And then comes the Kigali amendment, right? So that we have ozone depleting substances out of the atmosphere, right? So you should be looking at the sources, what is the use, okay, then what is the harmful effects on the environment, okay, otherwise why it is a pollutant. That is what UPSC is going to ask you. And then what is the harmful effect on humans as well, right? Then waste management. Okay, waste management, because all of this is going to create some kind of waste. Okay, for example, landfills. What type of policies do you have with respect to solid waste management, with respect to e-waste management? Okay, with respect to construction and demolition waste. Okay, with respect to the hazardous biomedical waste. Okay, what is the method of waste management, right? How do we manage those waste? Okay, what are the best practices related to that, whether we go for biological management, whether we go for chemical management, whether there is some kind of physical burning of those wastes. Okay, how do we manage these pollutants as well as wastes? Then fifth is legislation. Okay, connect this legislation. Okay, we have Environmental Protection Act, that is an umbrella act, and because of that we will have several other acts that are meant, or rules that are meant to implement this overall goal of environmental protection. So what are those legislations? What are the powers under those legislations? Okay, for example, you have coastal regulation zones. Okay, for example, you will have some other acts. Okay, even with respect to waste management rules, you will have these acts. So what are the jurisdiction? Okay, what is present in those acts? And then what specific things are they trying to manage, right? So this becomes important. Legislation and also the conventions. Okay, you can relate it to the international conventions. For example, Stockholm Convention is there, Rotterdam Convention is there, right? Which talks about hazardous wastes, how to manage them. Okay, how to manage the transboundary wastes. These become very, very important, right? So I should be covering this holistically in this manner, right? These are the ones that are derived from the previous year questions. Highly polluting industries, I should try to connect them. Which of the highly polluting industries will emit these kind of pollutants, and these pollutants are mostly emitted by which of the industries, right? Connect them. This will help you. Now moving forward to biodiversity and its conservation. Okay, this is one part that is very heavy when it comes to the factual content. Okay, we are talking about biodiversity and its conservation. Okay, so the questions, the syllabus that you should broadly refer to is flora, fauna, Indian wildlife diversity. What are their habitats? Okay, because one of the problems with respect to the conservation processes is the habitat degradation or habitat fragmentation, right? Their peculiar features. Okay, features such as their nutrition mode, features such as which kind of climate do they survive in, features such as what are their morphological adaptations, features such as what are their behaviors, right? Then the endangered status, that is with respect to understanding whether they should be conserved or not. Okay, whether their population is abundantly available or it is restricted to a few locations, right? This means that I should be aware whether they are having some kind of threat. And here your endemic species become very, very important. Okay, any animal that is endemic in nature, that is particularly located and belongs to that region, if I destroy that habitat, then it becomes important for us. This means that for the animals it is very important to know the endemic species, right? Then coral reefs, they have asked about the cold corals also, right? Not just the ones that are present in the tropical zones, right? What are the threats to biodiversity, right? So these are the important components of the syllabus, right? Now, various government and non-government initiatives for biodiversity and environmental protection, climate change, ozone depletion, and Wildlife Protection Act, that is Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, that underwent a change, amendment in 2023, and therefore it became a part of our paper also. They asked about the schedules, they asked about the vermin, right? What is a vermin, right? Then protected areas will carry your national parks, biosphere reserves, okay, wildlife sanctuaries, tiger reserves, elephant reserves. Okay, this becomes very heavy with respect to the factual content. Various projects, etc., like biosphere reserves, national parks, Ramsar Convention with respect to wetlands, Ramsar sites, Environmental Protection Act, etc. Okay, so this is the syllabus that we have to refer to, right? What do I have to prepare within them? I would suggest that first prepare a factual part. Okay, factual content. Okay, most of the times we will feel that this factual content is not getting prepared. Okay, I have more than 50 tiger reserves, I have more than 500 wildlife sanctuaries, I have more than 120 national parks, right? And species are endless, right? So the factual content must be prepared through a filter. What is a filter? The filter is previous year question and current affairs, the one that I was talking earlier. This means the ones that have appeared in my PYQs, I must know about them. Secondly, with respect to current affairs, whatever has appeared in the current affairs, I should prepare about them, right? I should be focusing on these at least. Okay, if you can go further, nothing better than that. Okay, so I should try to cover the factual content with respect to this. Now, with respect to protected areas, okay, prepare on protected areas. With respect to protected areas, I should prepare climatic region. Okay, how many, what is the flora, fauna there? What are the endemic species there, right? Which ones are the ones that are endangered? Okay, they have a protection status under WPA or with respect to IUCN status. Okay, and then if any kind of geographical feature is present in that national park, right? This is something that I should prepare for each wildlife, for each of the filtered wildlife sanctuary, each of the filtered national park, each of the filtered biosphere reserves, each for the filtered tiger reserves, right? So we are talking about, what do I have to prepare? Animals, okay, and then we are talking about location, then we are talking about climate, okay, then we are talking about any kind of threats. I'm also talking about any kind of geographical feature. If you can cover these 4 to 5 things about the protected area from the lens of PYQ and CA current affairs, then most of your job is done, right? Along with that, please pay a special focus on the highest, lowest, smallest, largest, first, and recent most. Okay, if you prepare like this acts as a filter. Otherwise you will go on preparing, you will not have an idea which ones I should prepare, which ones I should not. Okay, that will eat up your time, very very valuable time, because you have to prepare factual content from other subjects also, right? So please do it like this. You will feel much better. You will feel that the coverage is done. Okay, even with respect to the mock test, whatever you find about these protected areas, please try to include it in your notes for last minute revision, right? Now flora, at least Wildlife Protection Act and Biological Diversity Act, this must be done. Okay, Biological Diversity Act and Wildlife Protection Act both have underwent an amendment. Biological Diversity Act was in 2002. Okay, recently it underwent amendment. And then with respect to fauna, okay, you should not be going forward with near threatened. Okay, you should be focusing more on endangered, critically endangered and vulnerable species in Indian biodiversity, right? So IUCN status, Wildlife Protection Act with respect to the protection status that is given to the various animals. Then Convention on Migratory Species, that we also known as Bonn Convention, right? And with respect to trafficking, what is traffic? What is with respect to this organization, whether it is an NGO, whether it is a research center, whether it is a government operated body, right? Then conservation projects become important, and specifically with respect to the integrated species conservation. Okay, integrated species wildlife habitats, these type of species conservation program is there. Okay, and it lists around 20 plus species. For those you will usually have conservation projects, so at least you should learn what are these animals, whether they are birds, whether they are mammals, whether they are fish, okay, whether they are any kind of reptiles, right? I should learn which category do they fall under, where are they found, all right, and what is a project with respect to them that is there by the government, right? Now threats and mechanisms, how is their habitat, how is their life, how their survival is being threatened. Okay, these becomes important in guessing, okay, why this option is correct, why this option is not correct. Okay, protected areas we have discussed. Legislations, again, these are the ones that are very very important. Okay, now the treatment of factual content, it is something that you must realize that you cannot prepare in one day, right? So it means it needs at least 5 to 6 iterations, you going through first preparing these lists, then going through them multiple times. Okay, I would suggest you go through these lists at least 4 to 5 times. Also in this process, do attempt the PYQs. In this process, do re-attempt this mock test questions based on these portions. Okay, you will realize that you are able to grasp more out of it, right? Now moving forward to climate change. Okay, what kind of questions do we have? So we have theoretical questions on climate change, okay, like causes of climate change, contributing factors, okay, terms associated with climate change, scientific solutions. Okay, even with respect to, you would have seen that there is questions on geoengineering, okay, when we talk about sulfate aerosols, okay, because we understand that sulfur dioxide has a cooling effect, okay. You should not get confused that sulfur dioxide, whether it is a greenhouse gas or whether it has a cooling effect. Your fundamentals should be clear, crystal, right? Now, with respect to this terms, okay, you have seen terms like greenwashing, okay, like what is carbon credit? Last year, they asked about the carbon markets. Simple question based on this term's definition. What is carbon credit? Right? They may ask you. Right? So these kind of terms must be something that I must be clear with respect to definition. Okay, if these are the ones that are appearing in the current affairs, I must be clear with the definition of it. Okay, I must be very, very clear because they will give you similar options, right? Concepts. What are the concepts related to the climate change? We must understand what is global warming potential. I must understand what is radiative forcing. I must understand which are the gases that are more important with respect to the climate change. Okay, I must understand what are the effects of climate change. Okay, ocean acidification, I must understand the mechanism. Okay, with respect to sea level rise, I must understand this mechanism. Shrinking of cryosphere, the mechanism is to be understood, right? Then COPs and RED plus. Okay, RED plus is with respect to deforestation and for deforestation and forest degradation. Okay, is it legally binding? Is it not legally binding? Okay, with respect to conference of parties also, COP 30 is especially important. Both COP 29 and 30 must be prepared. Okay, and especially with respect to initiatives that India has taken, right, in these COPs. You must be aware of the Indian initiatives, right, and also the places where India has chose not to be a part of. Okay, there are some things that happen in the main text of COPs, and then there are some things that happen on the sidelines. Okay, you should be prepared absolutely with the main text, right, and with respect to the other on the sidelines, you should be prepared with which is India a part of, which is India not a part of. Okay, whether they are legally binding or not. All right. Then reports. A lot many times you will see that reports are a cause of debate. Okay, adaptation gap report that was published by United Nations Environment Program. So I must be aware of these reports and be able to connect them to their reports as well. Okay, because in the past years papers, if you go like 6-7 years back also, you will find that they are directly asking whether this report is published by which of the following organizations. All right. So this is something that I must be prepared with in climate change. Now the last part, international conventions and organizations. So global initiatives for climate, environment, biodiversity protection. Okay, all of these need to be prepared. So I have Convention on Biological Diversity. I have the Convention for Climate Change. I have CITES, right? All of these you should have an idea about. Okay, you should try and notice when it was found. Okay, whether India is a party to it or not. Okay, whether it is legally binding. Okay, has there been a recent meeting and what was decided in that meeting? These 3 to 4 questions you should be aware about these international conventions and organizations. Apart from that, the programs that are under various kinds of United Nations specialized organizations. Okay, specialized organizations like FAO, right? Specialized UN organizations we should be prepared with. Okay, this can be done by visiting the websites. Visit the websites, okay, and see if there are some important initiatives that are taken globally. Okay, they might just ask whether it is with respect to a particular zone or a particular organization under the UN, right? It will be very, very easy for you to guess them, right? Then reports, again, as we saw, reports of various UN specialized organizations or with respect to the ones that are very, very important like IPCC, right? This also becomes important, right? So these are the ways in which I can cover environment extensively. I would suggest for the factual content, Please prepare all of those lists, okay, whether it is Ramsar sites, whether it is national park, whether it is biosphere reserve, whether it is animal species based on their protection level. Prepare all these lists under the headers which are being asked in the multiple previous year questions. Stick those lists on the wall of your room and go through that continuously. Have multiple iterations of those revision rounds, okay. That is how the factual content will get memorized. And please try to attempt as many questions as possible. Wishing you the best. Thank you so much.